How you doing? My name is Orb. You're watching Orb Minus. Today is going to be a little bit out of the norm because I have one serious headache right now. It's cold outside, and frankly, I don't want to freeze my butt off and make this headache worse. So I figured, what's a good video? I couldn't really come up with a decent idea that wasn't memes or going out to the range. So I did something, in my opinion, a little bit sketchy that I've been putting off for a while, and I have managed to pull it off, I think. Because I haven't really shot it to see if it works or not. So, maybe some of you don't know. Maybe you do. Not entirely sure. I'm unaware. Either way. Uh, Ammunition is comprised of different parts, and essentially they are what makes the ability of sending something projectile across a distance. I got interested in the science of it and the process and the actual doing of it. And of course, with the purchasing of different materials, you can save a decent penny on the ammunition you would typically buy off of store shelves. Granted, that's essentially what you're saving is that convenience cost of going to a store, burning through gas, purchasing it on top of the tax, right? And then going out and shooting at the range. It eliminates all the middleman work, all the burning of gas. You just have it, and you can purchase each and every one of those materials and have them shipped straight to your door. You don't have to go to an FFL dealer or anything. They just come straight to you. The only missing component is the housing of those materials in order to achieve that cartridge. Essentially, well, perfect. Okay, so essentially, this right here is the anatomy of a cartridge, right? Essentially, you have your metal jacket, which encases lead. That is your projectile. We call that bullet. Inside of the shinier, lighter yellow brass looking thing, that's where all your powder goes. Nothing else, nothing more, nothing less. The flash hole is essentially a connector between the primer and that powder, so when the primer is struck, there is an element on the inside of that primer that ignites and starts to burn that very flammable powder. And of course, the science is the pressure builds up inside that cartridge over a short, very small amount of time in the like tenths, hundredths of a millisecond, tenths, hundredths of a second, something like that. Pressure builds up, travels the path of least resistance. Because the hole's too small on one end, it has to go through another hole. That would be behind where the bullet is. That pressure builds up a tremendous amount and sends our projectile down a barrel. That barrel leaves musket or muzzle and it just hits whatever point, right? So essentially, I did just that. I put one of these together. And the most, this is me explaining my experience to you. This is in no way teaching you how to reload any of this. I'm just portraying what I've had to go through in order to build the confidence I needed to use my press in order to replicate one of those. And I gotta say, it was very nerve-wracking because no experience, complete noob, to actually doing this. Even after all the money has spent to reload, it's not that hard of a process. Like, reloading is not difficult so long as you are reading those instructions constantly. And let me make something perfectly clear. I spent about 4.5 hours just actually bouncing back and forth between trying to figure out charge weights, the amount of powder that goes into the brass bit, like how much of that I needed, and reading the manual so I'm not hooking up a different part to my press that I didn't need. Um, Essentially, though, my my tool set, what I was using in order to reload, I'm using a turret press, but because I'm so new, I figured I could use the turret press later on as a turret press when I'm confident in doing that. I can 1-2 and it just rotate, and that's one round for every 4 1-2 1-2 1-2, right? Um, Essentially, though, I have taken that press and I've taken the index out, so I'm using it as a single stage to better familiarize myself with the process. And yeah, it's pretty fun. Um, I will say that the case prep is a little worrying to me, just a bit. However, I've looked up enough YouTube videos to know what to use, what not to use, and how effective some things are versus others. In my entire opinion, I think using the needed what is it called? Because I was using different brands. I'm using different brands of cleaning method versus brand on press versus. I'm pretty sure my weight, the scale I have, is a different brand altogether. Various tools, very different brands. A combination. I'm using a Lee Precision turret press again as a single stage, but it is a turret press. It has the disc, it rotates. You have 4 holes for your dies for the caliber. Um, the cleaning process, I'm using a Hornady tumbler and a Hornady sonic cleaner. And what I did was for that process was I ran the tumbler with about 20, 24, 25 plus 50, so 75 cases of brass. I got like normal brass, but what I did was I reloaded nickel brass. So this brown, like yellow bit right here, that's not yellow. That's silver. I'll show you guys here in a second, but right there, that's not yellow. That's silver for me. Um, Essentially, I ran that tumbler twice for about 3 hours each time, and I let it go the full 3 hours before I stopped it. And I didn't touch the brass while it was in there. I just 3 hours, went to work, came back, started it again, 3 hours, stopped, and I let it sit there for a day. After that, I took all the brass out. I sifted it out completely, got my brass as shiny as I could with that. And then what I did was, because there were still hints of carbon buildup, when you'll see that if you ever choose to reload, you got the brass had a little bit of carbon buildup, so I was trying to figure out how else to handle that because I had a primer pocket cleaner and that did the job pretty well for the pockets. But on the inside of the brass, around the, if you look on the inside of this yellow bit right here, on the inside, you'll see where it cuts off on that corner right there with the gray. I know you can't see it because the image is in front of my finger, but essentially it goes up, and my problem was in that same corner right there, there'd be a little bit more of that black stuff just stuck to the side, and it wouldn't come off through the tumbler. So I had to find another means, and I figured, okay, if I'm gonna really do this and actually reload the way I want to, I'm gonna go all in. I got the sonic cleaner immediately after finding out that that could get removed with it. Um, Essentially, I got a soap from same dealer that got the sonic cleaner and the tumbler, right? I ordered my press offline, but the sonic cleaner was, they're both Hornady tumbler and the sonic cleaner Hornady stuff. Uh, I didn't know what to do about the soap and how to use it, and I couldn't figure out for the life of me like the amounts needed to effectively clean brass. So what I did was I essentially went AI and Google with it and figured out my number for how much soap to water because it's a ratio. If you do too much, this yellow will corrode or have like spots on it where it'll slowly begin to deteriorate over time at a very fast rate. Not like you can buy store like ammo off of the store shelf and it'd be like completely there and intact because they do it professionally. Essentially, though, like all that yellow will turn either green or brown if the soap you use is too concentrated, so too much soap versus water. And if you use too much water versus soap, it won't get as clean, right? I couldn't figure out for the life of me what that combination ought to be for nickel plated brass because it is a different set of like element. It's a different alloy compared to this yellow stiff right here, right? Um, so I went to AI Google and my calculator because I went to my calculator and I figured out the exact number per the capacity of said sonic cleaner. So that way I get the best result for the shine of it and it looks professionally done, really, really well made. And the brass is overall clean and I can use it and it'd be okay. I was a little concerned about that because I couldn't figure it out for a while, and the brass had just sat there outside the tumbler for a minute, and I'm like, okay, I really need to look this up because if the tumble messes up the brass, I'm gonna have to use the sonic cleaner eventually, or redo the tumble, sift it out again, and then do sonic clean and then get it shiny the way I want it and clean the way I need it. After it was done and I had taken it out, the sonic cleaner, I dispensed of all the nastiness on the inside. I decided to hand dry them. So each single one of those pieces of brass, without the primer, powder, or the bullet in it, I took each one and I took a moist wickening cloth and I just hand dried each one. I tried shoving it into the middle to get as much as that carbon out from the inside as possible. So that way it was as clean as I could get it on the inside, and there was the least amount of water possible on the inside as well. So that way there wouldn't be like a reverse corrosion from the inside out. I let After I had hand dried each one, I let it sit for 2 days outside of everything, and I put the same cloth I used to dry them, like the dryer, because I used two of them. I put the dryer of the two on top. I put the more used wet one on the bottom, so that way all the water could get um, wicked off of them and then put into that. Um, I guess that was the best idea because leaving them out apparently results in smudges. A question for you experienced ones that are not as new as I am or a noob. Potentially you could help some of us out. When I got through tumbling, all the brass, every single one of them, were shiny. They worked. The carbon was still there, and yes, it needed to be cleaned. However, I found a weird result on the sonic clean part, right? Putting the brass into the sonic cleaner, shiny, and it was okay to put in there. The result of after sonic cleaning was weird because the nickel plated stuff was like super shiny. It looked the same as before, except with less carbon buildup around the sides. It's not like it was very heavy. Granted, it was 50 AE out of a Desert Eagle, but the carbon buildup on the nickel plate wasn't bad. It really wasn't. Versus the yellow bit, because I'll even show you here. Let me see if I can find. Yeah. So essentially, the nickel plated was perfect. There was no blurry like smudge on it, right? Not like fingerprint smudge. I'm talking like oh gosh, kind of like when you peel a piece of tape off of something, right? If you look at it before, put the tape on and then rip it off and then look at where the tape was, you could see where that glue had stuck to it. It looks like that, except this isn't glue and it still feels completely smooth even though I touch it. Oh, I hope this focuses. Let's see if it does. So I know that's hard to see. Come on, focus. You can see a little bit right there going up diagonally. Right in. Oh gosh, that's really hard to do. Right there ish. You can see it right there, even though it's out of focus. I'm trying to find a. There you go. It's hard to see, I know, but there is essentially like little bitty smudges all over that. And I didn't know what to do because there are like much, much worse pieces than this one right here that I had cleaned from the Sonic cleaner. And the smudges gave me a little scare because I didn't know if that was the spots I was supposed to be looking for. Some of them, after a while, did turn brown, but again, they were completely smooth, and it didn't feel as though it was protruding or beveling. There was no real indicator that that was the rust or the corrosion that I needed to be on the lookout for. My question to the experienced people is, how do you prevent this on that color brass specifically? Because my understanding was after the Sonic clean, all the brass, per the instruction manual on the Sonic cleaner itself, after using their detergent for that cleaning process, all the brass in it should have been like spick and span shiny, hyper reflective, no smudges, no nothing. If it's a combination of stuff, I mean, I don't really know what I could have done to prevent that. And I've looked up several different places that say this and that, and you should probably do a bunch of this. I kind of want to know the general answer on it because I'm not entirely sure what could cause that and how to prevent it from happening again. I understand to separate brass into batches, so nickel and brass elsewhere. I didn't do that for the sake of time. Um, I honestly have no idea. I want to know. If you have an answer to that, there's a comment section down below. I'm also tempted to post a article on Reddit. On Reddit. Reddit was a great movie, but Reddit. On my specific subreddit, if you want to check that article out, there'll be a link in the description as well as the channel description. So check those out. But yeah, after the cleaning process, I essentially referred to my manuals. I did everything in my power to look at the manuals as I needed them. I didn't stress about it. I made sure to put on some music so I had something in my ear putting me in that focus I needed to be undistracted with. And I made conversation with a couple of friends from online, and they seemed to understand what I was doing, and I'm appreciative of them for sticking around as long as they did. I know I took way too long. I didn't even get to play games with them. I just sat there in the party listening to music, singing, and talking the whole time. And all the while I was reading and handling tiny explosives. But yeah, after the cleaning process, I went to the manuals and I figured out how to prime casing, which, in my opinion, the book and the manual that comes with the dies, right, for each specific caliber, they don't do it as well as one of the forums I found, where essentially I found a guy that said imagine putting the arm, the primer arm, into the machine and pulling the lever, right? Or not pulling the lever, but letting it down because it's a reverse function. You don't go up, you go down. Essentially, imagine a case with that arm there, and then you go as though you're about to, and then you feel where the bottom of that pocket is, and imagine where and see where exactly that lever is, and then do it based off feel rather than think, oh, there's a number to this. I could just put it on something and let it go to a number and boom, done. I didn't do that. I did it entirely by feel because I wanted to know what it was like to do that. But as a result of me reading those forums and understanding, it's not about putting a large amount of pressure on that primer to get it seated correctly. It's just by feel how much you need to, how much sensitivity you need on the sense of touch when you're seating that primer oh so gently. But well enough that you're not protruding. So your primer is that little silver thing in the center right there. If it protrudes out even a little bit, it could mess up your firearm or accidentally detonate, and that's not a good day for anybody. Um, Essentially, that primer has to be either flush or below flush, and so that way more than this way when reloading. And the entire time I was reading and looking into the book, looking into the instructions, understanding, they they always mention that pressure has to be firm with a press that has the lever going down. That pressure is greatly, in my opinion, greatly changed, as well as the dispensing of primers. You have the little pocket of primers you shake back and forth, fill the trough, and then you connect to the thing. That's essentially what I'm doing over there. Um, that does not need to be firmly used either. It just has to line up with the little groove for that primer to fall into. It's a gentle press. You just slide it onto the track and then click a button and boom, your primer is good. And then, of course, the actual seating of the primer is relatively gentle. It's extremely sensitive based. You have to know where that bottom bit of the primer pocket, that right there, like draw a straight line up from my finger. The bottom of that silver towards this side, you have to remember where that is and how much down motion you had to get to from the start of the pocket to the end of the pocket. And then the pressure only has to go a little bit further in order to get the silver itself below flush. I don't know if there's such a thing as overseating a primer. I thought it was when it was crushed or over pressurized that it could cause that spark and ignite, detonate that silver. Um, I was a bit skeptical on that, and that was probably the most sketchy part, was just seating the primer, in my opinion, because it's entirely based off feel. And in my opinion, if you're not super sensitive with your feelers here, if you can't really feel a lot of pressure on these, I'm afraid you're going to be running a risk of actually detonating that or accidentally detonating it in some way, shape, or form. Um, I didn't really do it with any anti-static stuff. I wasn't really attached to anything. I just did it in normal attire, just having fun. Um, of course, we did it responsibly, and I didn't blow myself up. I have my fingers. I am good. No digits lost. Um, but yeah, in my opinion, the sketchiest part is seating that primer because it's entirely based off feel. After the primer was seated, and I did that in one stage, like every cartridge I was doing stuff with, there was no powder, there was no bullet, it was just brass and that silver bit, and me sitting that. I seated like 50 of those before I moved on to the powder. Again, single stage. I just kept doing that over and over and over again. I made sure this was below flush the entire time, so that way there was no discrepancy. Every single one was loaded the exact same way. And every time I had a problem or a question, I would either go to a forum where someone has experience, or I would go to the instruction manual, and of course they had pictures in there, hallelujah, of that exact silver bit below flush, and I would know exactly what to look for. If you have fingernails, in my opinion, those will be your greatest asset because they are like super sensitive, especially on your index finger where you can just slide it over something and you can feel that dip if it's below flush. That tells you it's been properly seated and you can move on to stage 2, and that is the powder. So the powder bit. Now I'm gonna move on from the primer now. The powder bit, so all that black stuff, the propellant in there, that in my opinion was not as sketchy, but it was kind of complicated because you have to know exactly what tool you're using to dispense that powder, or if you're doing it by hand. Regardless, you want to get one of these. Hang on. You want to get something like this right here. Hot dog. Let me move. You want to get something like this right here. This is my digital scale. It measures in like grains and stuff. Hang on, let me show you. So this is a Hornady like micro scale, I guess. As you can see, you've got. Dang, the camera does not want to focus. There you go. You got grains on that side. You got what's that? 0.5 grams. 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 0.5 Yeah, you have your 0 on the left, your power button there, and it's pretty simple to use. Um, Essentially, though, I used this to measure every single charge, and yes, I did that for every single one down to the last one, because the it's recommended everywhere. It is told everywhere. There's caution signs everywhere when reloading to use the formula in the book, and it tells you beginning to end what you can do and what you don't do to safely reload and use said firearm you are reloading, MO4. Um, the only complicated part was the tool that I was using. And essentially, what I was using was a powder through die, where you take the brass that has primer in it, you slot it in, you pull your lever. The brass goes up into a chamber. That chamber flares the neck to allow bullet to be seated. So I wish I could capture my cursor while I'm recording. I don't know why it won't let me. But essentially, it flares the very end of this yellow bit right here. So for me, it'd be silver. It flares that little bit to allow the bullet to be seated, to be inserted just a little bit past this yellow bit right here. And essentially, it did that, and it put the powder into it, right? And I had to figure out exactly what setting I needed that specific tool to be at in order to fill the silver bit with that powder right there. Because if you do too much, it'll explode in much, much, much greater quantity, and you don't want that. And of course, you can't do too less, because then the bullet won't go anywhere. It won't make it out the end of the muzzle. Of course, there are a number of other things that the book says this thing could do if it's under powdered or over powdered. The book specifies everything, and I wasn't questioning what it would do. I was more so questioning, how am I going to put that much powder in here at such a very specific interval? Because I didn't want to double charge or undercharge it in any way. Overcharge it, undercharge. You get the point. The difficult part was that tool that I was using, because it has a key on it that turns, and every like little face of that key, granted there was 2 faces on one side, but the inserting part, there's like 10 faces on that to put it into the thing, because it's like that. Each one of those was 0.01 cc. You don't know what that is? That's very, very small. There's no way, I don't think I can depict that for you. It is incredibly small. Very, very small amount. Like, we're talking less than a tenth of a grain of rice, if I'm not mistaken. If not, close to a grain of rice. I think a grain of rice is actually 0.1 cc. But in either case, the my brain just ran off its tracks. Like there was a train, and then it said, I don't know where I'm going. I couldn't figure out how to use that tool effectively without guesstimating. That's the only part where I stopped looking at the book, because I am not good with numbers. I am not good with measurements. Until I have a scale that tells me what I have and how much there is to go. And that's what I did the entire time. I got really close. Like I kept dispensing charges over and over until it got to the point I needed the charge to be. From there, I used another tool called a trickler, and that literally you turn like a little bit, and it drops a very tiny amount, very, 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 very tiny amount onto that scale. It goes up by 0.1, and from there, I got my desired powder amount, and from that, I did that with every single, all 50 rounds that I reloaded last night. After the powder was dispensed, the hard part, in my opinion, was over. The easy part, in my opinion, was seating the bullet. Like this right here, compared to what is said in the book, is 10 times easier doing than seating the primer and the dispensing the powder charge. in my opinion, because the neck is flared with the tool I have. The neck is flared and the powder is dispensed. All I had to do was dump the powder out, measure it right, throw it back in there, and then the bullet was the next easy, like the easiest thing of the entire process. Because once it was seated, you have a completed round. The die I currently have has the seating thing and a crimp on the inside that allows it to squeeze this little bit of the neck right here around said bullet after it's been seated in order to keep that tension between the brass and the bullet so the bullet doesn't fall out and it doesn't get seated deeper. Um but yeah, that was relatively easy. You just pop the bullet in, pull the lever on the correct die, and allow it to seat after putting everything together. Um of course, after each bullet was seated, I took that entire cartridge, this whole picture out, and essentially I took a caliper to it, a dial caliper, and I just measured that overall length, so the total distance between the tip of the bullet way over there and the head of the cartridge completely. And I took that exact measurement and I compared it to the book, so that way everything was pretty much taken care of. Um, the cleanup took a while. Not gonna lie about that. Typically, like, I don't really have a workstation. I have my desk like right here, and I've got about a foot to work with. And the entire time I was listening to music, not really caring about what I was doing or where I was doing, aside from keeping everything where it needed to be with each stage. So I wasn't getting confused between stages. I know exactly what primer stage needs. I know what powder. I know what bullet. I know what cartridge. Everything. I even got two bullet holders you can see over there. Those helped tremendously. If you guys are new to reloading and you don't know what to do about cartridges that might be charged, might be primed, might not be, I legit bounced back and forth between those two about 4 or 5 times, just making sure everything was good. And I made sure it was domino clockwork. If it wasn't charged, it's getting charged. If it's not primed, it's getting primed. Everything's in a train on those two blocks. The other things. Something I didn't realize was how much money would go into actually the equipment needed to reload. If you're new, not gonna lie, it's pricey. Depending on the machinery you get, it is very, very pricey. It can be as cheap as getting a couple hand tools. I think that'd be a little bit more dangerous, but there are also manuals that go with those that explain each and every detail you need to know to safely reload with those tools. I would highly recommend getting a reloading book if you are into reloading and are wanting to get into reloading, so you have a formula you can go off of that has been tested and approved by officials as well as the manufacturers of said machine and those same people handling, guess what, the ammunition you'd be reloading. I have not performed the plunk test yet between the Desert Eagle and one of the cartridges that I have reloaded yet. I think that'll be in the next video. Yeah. What are some other things that I experienced while I was reloading? So I guess I could throw this in there. The only things I took from others, that is not from the book or the instruction manual, but the experience of others. So the only experience, the only thing I took from anyone else when it came to reloading and what I ought to do about certain situations if they ever arise was about the crimp, if my rounds needed a crimp or if they didn't. I took into consideration what cleaning methods I ought to do and how long I should do drying process. I only did time intervals and the very, very technical stuff that many books don't really go over, and if they do, it's always a brand that it's an advertisement to buy more of their stuff, which I'm not opposed to because a lot of their stuff can be good. The more, I will say, the more you invest, the more quality of work you're going to get out of it. Um, I invested a little bit. I think my total cost for all the equipment, and some of it I didn't really use because the cartridge I was reloading is such a size that some of the tools that would be readily available to every other caliber wouldn't be very available for that. Unfortunately, the size is just too big. Um, or at least I haven't found any tools relevant to actually doing that. And all the tools I have, some work, some don't. Some of it's a waste of money. Probably won't use it until much, much later. But the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. If you are loading a large caliber or one that just hasn't had the chance to really sell on the market, and so you'd have to special order your parts or something like that, I would highly recommend doing that. So that way at least you have it ready to go in the event you do wind up needing it. But yeah, I only took the experience of others at face value, and I essentially cross-referenced that with what the book was saying and, of course, what I was looking at. Because the entire time I was comparing my ammo to a shelf bought from a store ammunition cartridge, right? So I had my baseline, I knew what to go off of. I had a formula that I wanted to create myself, and I got my desired result. I have cartridges now that I can shoot effectively, and as a bonus, I now know how to reload my own ammunition. I cannot think of anything else I had really had a question about. I had really questioned of since I started this endeavor. Um, I will say it took me a while to warm up to the idea of reloading my own ammunition. It took me a while to warm up to half the guns I own, and I own a few, to say the least. Um, I will say that if you guys are interested in doing anything with firearms, may that be reloading, may that be getting into the market, whatever, dip your toe in the water, test the waters first, make sure you're going to like it, because eventually that price tag is going to catch up with you, and you're not going to realize what you did until you're halfway down that road already. Um, Personally, I'm happy with my purchases, and I'm happy with the experiences I've had along the way. I appreciate you guys from watching this video, and of course all the experience I have asked of others along the way. Reloading has been a very stress inducing and very mindful thing of mine. I have been wanting to reload for years. I purchased the press like back in 2018. I just used it last night for the first time. I used that pressed, and I paid like $700 for it. And it came with a kit, its own book, a whole slew of tools that I honestly could have gotten anywhere else for much cheaper. I spent that much money on that alone, and I only used it once. Make sure you love what you do before you dive headfirst into it, because you might find something you might not like, and that's game over. In my genuine opinion, I like the reloading process. It's not hard. It's just time consuming, and in the right environment, you could love it for just that, for it being a time consumer. That's it, pretty much it. And of course, if you guys do like going out to the range, that's your cheaper alternative right there. Granted, you might not get that return you're looking for until years down the line, because you have that cost of equipment, and then of course buying the ammunition to fuel that reloading cycle. Yeah, I think that's about it. I appreciate you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, there's a thumbs up button down below. Make sure you smash that. Subscribe if you're newer on the comeback. I used to post every other week. Now I am using all three of my YouTube channels, as well as my fourth one for streams. be sure to check out the links in the description as well as the channel description, as each one will lead to different websites that have different links to different social medias for different content, for different reasons, for different audiences. Simple enough. Each week will be one video on one of three channels: Orb Plus, Orb, or Minus. You can find them by going to YouTube, hot dog. So essentially, you can find each and every one of these channels if you wanted to by pressing and going to youtube.com, which is up here, right? You go to the search bar, click it, and you type in the, no spaces, gaming orb, just like that, without the with an E. That's supposed to be the gaming orb. You type in that, press enter, boom. Here's my channel right here. If you want to type, or if you want to look at the content, you press on that, and then boom, you have all my content here. I have plenty of videos on this channel, as well as some other ones. Let's just go ahead and look at those right quick. We have the gaming orb, we have the reaction orb, which I am freshly using. This is a brand new, like, I've had this channel for a little bit. I am using this channel now for other content. As you can see, we have this here, boom. There are a little bit of videos you can see here. We got very little. That's going to grow over time. We also have this channel that you're currently watching by typing in the range orb. Boom. You can see my channel here, or minus. We have 70 subscribers, and we have 83 videos, guys. That is, I'm surprised I've posted that many videos on this. Of course, we have each one of these ready for you guys to watch and look and use. If you want to look at those, you can. You have my shorts here, we have videos here, and of course we have all our stuff here. Again, if you're new or on the return, you have a subscribe button here when you go to the channel here, or if you click on one of my videos, we'll just click on this for the sake of knowing, boom. This should be the same window you're looking at stuff in. You just scroll down, find my name, there's my subscriber count. You click on this, which is completely free, and you can essentially come back and view my videos anytime you want without having to worry about looking me up through the search bar. Yeah, be sure to hit that subscribe button while you're here. And yeah. If you guys enjoyed today's video, I appreciate you watching all the way to the end. I know that made no sense. I'm going to go to sleep now. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.